I've always been a bit of, I suppose, what you would call a chili head. I love always ordering the hottest thing on the menu. And if the hottest thing isn't on the menu, then I ask for it specially.
James Emery is a 31-year-old pilot. His favourite Indian restaurant is the Akash in the city of Portsmouth on the south coast of England.
I guess my first experience of curry would have been going to that restaurant, and I suppose you just kind of develop a natural attachment with the first kind of restaurant like that you go into. I would say 9 times out of 10 I always order exactly the same thing, which is a chicken fowl, basically when the chef just gets a big spoonful of chili powder and drops it in the pan when he's cooking. A keema naan, which is the one with the red mincemeat inside it, and some onion bhajis. It's not particularly authentic or traditional, but it's just something that I've always really, really loved.
But 8 years ago, James moved to southwest France, and he hasn't yet found a curry to match.
I would say French people have perhaps a more nuanced palate. They don't like things quite as hot as you might have them in the UK, and the sauces and the sort of the various accoutrements that go with the curry are sort of quite toned down. And it was kind of a tradition at home when you come home after sort of a long day and you get in and you couldn't be bothered to cook, so you just pick up the phone and ask someone to deliver a load of containers full of hot curry. And that kind of thing in France, I mean, you get some places where they do something similar, but it's not exactly the same thing. So it really was a question of just missing not just the food itself, but just the comfort aspect of getting a bag of food dropped off and opening up the containers and all the smells and everything that goes with it.
So at what point did you decide you wanted to have your curry from Portsmouth in the south of England flown over to France?
Well, in fact, the idea came initially from Faz, who's one of the brothers who runs the restaurant. On sort of one of my trips home, I would go in and have a meal and we'd sort of chat a little bit, and I'd always joke that the curry in France was always a little bit toned down, a little bit boring maybe for British tastes, and he kept on joking that one day he was going to deliver me a curry to France. And I thought, well, if we're going to do it, it might be quite fun to do it by air. But the aircraft that I fly are very small and can't carry a lot of weight. But I was actually very lucky in that a couple of my aviation contacts were happy to come on board and provide a bit of sponsoring for the event. So as it turned out, we had sponsoring which covered the entire cost of it. So essentially what we did was, the aircraft itself is based in Brest, in sort of the northwest of France. So I went up to Brest a couple of days in advance to get everything set up. And on the Saturday morning, we took off from Brest and we flew over to Lyon-Solent, which is just near Portsmouth on the south coast, and it was probably about 3/4 of an hour flight, something like that. And then we landed, I think, it must have been late morning in Lyon-Solent, loaded up all the curries, which had been cooked and were in sort of your standard takeaway containers, put them all in the cargo hold at the back of the aeroplane, and then I think about 3/4 of an hour later, we were off again.
And how much curry was there?
I think in total we loaded 80 main courses, and we loaded, I think, something like 75 portions of rice and 100 poppadoms.
So you flew the curry to France. What happened once you got there?
We had a room set up with some tables and chairs and sort of you could call it a field kitchen with an oven and a couple of microwaves to warm up all the food. And the people came in sort of about 7 p.m. and sat down in the little room in the corner of the hangar. And we just served up all the food, and I think there's been about between 30 and 40 people there, and they all seemed to enjoy it very much.
Were these English people living in France, or were they local people?
It was a combination of both, just so that everybody could sort of get something out of the event. So
what did the French make of it?
They really enjoyed it, actually. They thought it was something a bit novelty and a bit sort of
Well, novelty,
different.
yes, but did they like the curry?
I think they really did, yeah. I mean, I spoke to most of them afterwards, and they seemed very happy with it.
Can you estimate the total cost for us of flying over these, give or take, 90 or so curries?
Very good question. I would say about €6,000 just for the plane itself. And then I seem to remember the guy from the restaurant saying the curries were about £600 or £700. And on top of that, of course, we had airport fees, which were probably a couple of £100. So yeah, probably somewhere in the region of about £7,000 or £8,000, I would say.
About $10,500 then. So why do this, really? Is this a publicity stunt? And if so, who's it for? What's the point?
So, I mean, obviously the restaurant has got a lot of publicity out of it. For me personally, I didn't really get anything out of it at all, apart from a nice day out in an aeroplane.
And a curry. This was just a way of getting a free takeaway, wasn't it? An elaborate way.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I didn't actually eat any curry until I got home at about 1 o'clock in the morning, because I'd been spending so much time helping Faz, the guy from the restaurant, serve all the food.
So it was even less fresh and even less warm at that point.
But I have to say, I think once I finally got home and warmed up my own curry and ate it in my own living room, I think the satisfaction of actually doing it and sort of the complete crazy feeling of having done such a stupid thing, that's kind of made up for any lack of freshness.
So the food had become sort of secondary in the whole thing. You didn't really get to sit down and enjoy your curry in the way that you'd usually enjoy a takeaway.
That, I suppose, is one of the things that happens when you take an ideal and you get into the practical aspects of doing it. Sometimes they're not exactly the same thing.